I got my revenge, but it came at a terrible cost. Edit. For those of you doubting the truth of this story, let me be clear, I wish it were fake. I wouldn't be haunted every day by the choices I made and the pain that unfolded. I swear on my son's life, and all 5 of my kids, this is exactly how it happened. It all began in Los Angeles, 20 years ago. I was just 19, young, reckless, and full of ambition. My life revolved around trying to find my place in the sprawling chaos of the city. That's when I met Ebony. She was captivating in a way I couldn't explain. Her confidence bordered on arrogance, and her laugh had a way of commanding attention in any room. From the moment I saw her at a party in Silver Lake, I felt like she was the missing piece to a puzzle I didn't even know I was trying to solve. We started talking, and before I knew it, we were inseparable. But looking back, I see the red flags I ignored. The sharp edge to her tone when she didn't get her way, the way she'd twist the smallest argument into a battlefield. Yet, at 19, I thought passion was supposed to feel like chaos. Our relationship burned hot, but it burned fast. Ebony was the kind of person who didn't pull punches, especially with her words. She could build me up in one moment, only to tear me down in the next. "You're not sh*T, she'd say when we fought. "You'll never be anything. You're just wasting your time." At first, I fought back, but after months of hearing it, I started to believe her. Her words stuck to me like a curse, and every time I tried to rise above, she found new ways to drag me back down. I spent nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling of our cramped studio apartment in Koreatown, wondering if she was right. Maybe I was destined to fail. But something inside me refused to give in completely. When I finally left, it wasn't because I stopped loving her. It was because staying would have destroyed me. I remember the night vividly, the way the city lights reflected on the rain-soaked streets as I packed up what little I owned. I took our son, kissed him on the forehead, and walked out the door. Ebony didn't even try to stop me. Part of me was relieved, but another part of me was devastated. This wasn't how I imagined my life turning out. Before I left for good, we had one final fight, a fight that burned itself into my memory. She was shouting, hurling insults like daggers, and I couldn't take it anymore. "In this game of life, I won't lose," I told her, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I promise you this, when it's all said and done, I'll be on top, and you won't. I hate losing, and I will not lose." Those words were a promise to myself as much as they were to her. I didn't know how I'd make it happen, but I knew I couldn't let her win. Life after Ebony wasn't easy. I moved in with a friend, sleeping on a mattress on the floor while working long hours to support my son. Every day felt like a battle, against exhaustion, against doubt, against the lingering echo of Ebony's words in my mind. But then, I met her. My wife wasn't like anyone I'd ever known. She had this quiet strength about her, this unshakable belief that things could get better. We met at a coffee shop in downtown LA, and from the first conversation, I felt like I could breathe again. She didn't just see the man I was, she saw the man I could become. We fell in love slowly, intentionally, and by the time we got married, I felt like I was finally starting to build something real. Then Ebony came back into my life. The call came out of nowhere. "I need you to take my daughter," she said, her voice flat and matter-of-fact. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her right. "Why would I do that?" I asked, gripping the phone tightly. She sighed. "She has nowhere else to go. At least let her be with her brother." I didn't know what to say. This wasn't my responsibility. But when I told my wife, her reaction was immediate and firm. "We may not have much," she said, her voice resolute. "But we've got love, a roof over our heads, and food on the table. That child needs us. We'll take her." That's the kind of woman my wife is, selfless, compassionate, and unshakably kind. So, we took Ebony's daughter in and raised her as our own. I told Ebony she didn't need to pay child support or send money. All I asked was that she use the time to get her life together. "Go to school," I told her. "Get an education. In 5 years, let's revisit this and figure out a way to co-parent. It seemed like a fair deal. But Ebony didn't take the opportunity. While my wife and I were juggling full-time jobs, school, and raising 5 kids, Ebony was out partying, drinking, and posting photos of her new tattoos on social media. 5 years passed, and nothing had changed. My wife and I had clawed our way out of poverty. We'd moved into a modest house in the suburbs and were finally starting to feel stable. Meanwhile, Ebony was still stuck in the same place. I finally put her on child support, $180 a month for 1 kid. It wasn't much, but it was a symbolic gesture. She needed to contribute something. When I told her, she exploded. "You're ruining my life," she screamed over the phone. "You're a piece of SHT. You've always been a piece of SHT." Her words didn't hurt anymore. I'd heard it all before. Instead of engaging, I hung up and focused on my family. I kept telling myself the same mantra I'd repeated for years: I won't lose. 15 years later, Ebony was summoned to Los Angeles for a child support hearing. She hadn't seen the kids in over 5 years. After the hearing, I invited her to my house to see the kids. At first, she refused, but I insisted. When she pulled into my driveway with her boyfriend, I saw the shock on her face. My house was everything she thought I could never achieve. The long driveway, the manicured lawn, the sprawling 2-story home, it was a far cry from the tiny apartment we once shared. Her boyfriend stepped out of the car, looking around in awe. "Man, this place is beautiful," he said, shaking his head. I walked him to the edge of my property and pointed to the horizon. "See that driveway down there? I own everything from here to there." Inside, the house tour continued. Her boyfriend couldn't stop praising the house, the backyard, the man cave with my PS5 and gaming setup. With every compliment, I saw the anger build on Ebony's face. When my wife came out of her office, radiant, fit, and glowing, I caught Ebony staring. Later, she'd call her little B*TCH, but in that moment, she had nothing to say. Before she left, Ebony turned to me and said, "You said you wouldn't lose. And you didn't." 2 years later, Ebony called me. Her voice was weak and trembling. "My liver's failing," she said. "The doctors told me one more drink will kill me." For the first time in years, she wasn't angry. She was scared. She apologized for everything, for the fights, the insults, the neglect. She begged me to promise I'd always take care of the kids. I reassured her that I would. That was the last time we spoke. 2 days later, she died alone in a hotel room. Months after her death, I called her boyfriend to check on him. That's when I learned the full extent of Ebony's pain. She hadn't told him about her condition. She hadn't told anyone. Even now, years later, I think about that final phone call. In her darkest moment, when she was terrified and alone, she didn't call her boyfriend. She didn't call her family. She called me. And that's a weight I'll carry for the rest of my life. R.I.P. Ebony. Edit: yesterday, I broke down. Driving home from work, I thought about Ebony and cried the entire way. I finally told my wife about everything, about the guilt, the last phone call, and the pain I've carried since she passed. She held my hand and told me it was okay. But deep down, I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself. Continuation: the weight of regret. It's strange how life plays out. In the years following Ebony's death, I thought I'd find peace. After all, I had kept my promise. I raised the kids, provided for them, and gave them a life filled with love and stability. But peace never came. Instead, there's this heavy emptiness that lingers, like a shadow I can't shake. After her passing, Ebony's daughter, my daughter in every way that matters, asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. "Did my mom love me?" she asked one evening while we were sitting in the backyard, watching the sunset. Her voice was so soft, it broke something in me. "Yes, she did," I told her, forcing myself to meet her gaze. "She loved you very much, but she had her struggles. It wasn't your fault. None of it was your fault. I don't know if she believed me, but it was the truth. Ebony's love was messy, tangled in her pain and mistakes, but it was there. A few months after that conversation, Ebony's boyfriend called me. He'd been sorting through some of her things and found a notebook she'd kept. I didn't even know she was the type to write things down, but apparently she had filled pages with thoughts, regrets, and apologies she never voiced. When he brought the notebook to me, I hesitated to open it. It felt like invading a part of her life that was too raw, too personal. But eventually, curiosity and guilt won out. I stayed up all night reading her words. There were pages of anger, directed at me, at herself, at the world. But there were also moments of vulnerability that I never knew she was capable of. She wrote about how much she missed the kids, how she wished she could turn back time and make different choices. One entry, written just a month before she died, stuck with me. I don't know if I'll ever be able to face them. What do you say to the people you've hurt the most? How do you ask for forgiveness when you don't feel like you deserve it? I want to tell them I'm sorry. I want to tell them I love them. But I'm so scared they'll never believe me. I cried that night. For all the years we'd spent at war with each other, for the pain she carried alone, for the children who would never get the chance to hear her say those words. Life moved on, as it always does, but her memory stayed with me. Every milestone the kids reached, graduations, first jobs, weddings, was bittersweet. Ebony should have been there. She should have been the one cheering them on, hugging them, telling them how proud she was. On particularly hard days, I visit her grave. It's a modest plot in a quiet cemetery just outside of Los Angeles. I bring flowers, she always loved sunflowers, and sit there, talking to her as if she can hear me. I tell her about the kids, about their accomplishments, their struggles, their joys. I tell her about my life, too, about how much I've changed since those turbulent years we spent together. Did you see them? I'll ask, staring at the headstone. Did you see how beautiful they looked at graduation? You would have been so proud, Ebony. Sometimes, I imagine her sitting next to me, rolling her eyes at my sentimentality. You're such a sap, she'd probably say, her lips curling into that familiar smirk. One night, years after her death, I had a dream about Ebony. We were back in that tiny apartment in Koreatown, but everything felt different. She wasn't angry. Her eyes, which had always been filled with fire, were soft, almost peaceful. You did good, she said, her voice calm. You kept your promise. I woke up in tears, clutching the pillow like it was some kind of lifeline. I don't know if it was my subconscious giving me the closure I so desperately needed, or if it was something else entirely. Either way, it brought me a strange sense of comfort. Now, as I write this, I think about how much life has changed. The kids are grown and thriving, each one carving out their own path in the world. My wife, my rock, remains as steadfast as ever, though she worries about me sometimes. She says I carry too much guilt, that I've done more than enough to atone for my mistakes. Maybe she's right. But part of me wonders if I'll ever truly let go of the past. Ebony wasn't just a chapter in my life, she was the catalyst for so much of who I am today. The pain, the struggles, the triumphs, all of it ties back to her in some way. I don't hate her. I never did, not really. Even when she was at her worst, there was a part of me that understood her. She was a broken person trying to survive in a world that didn't always make sense to her. And while she made mistakes, terrible, life-altering mistakes, I know she loved her kids. I just wish she'd loved herself enough to stay. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that life is messy. It's filled with heartbreak and triumph, with mistakes and second chances. And sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the ones who teach us the greatest lessons. So, to Ebony, wherever you are, I want you to know this: I forgive you. I hope you found the peace you couldn't find in life. And I hope, in some way, you know that your kids are okay. They're more than okay, they're amazing. Rest easy, Ebony. You're free now. Edit: For those of you who've read this far, thank you. Sharing this story wasn't easy, but it's been cathartic. If there's one takeaway I hope you get, it's this: don't wait to make amends. Life is too short, too fragile, to hold on to anger and pride. Let the people you love know how much they mean to you while you still can.